You are listening to the Tallest Kaiju Podcast. Thank you for listening to the Tallest Kaiju Podcast. In today's episode, I am joined by Cullen Bunn. Cullen Bunn is an incredible writer, having written so many comic books that I guarantee you've heard of, at least some of these, some of which like The Sixth Gun, Harrow County, Parish, The Damned, The Empty Man, which also got a movie adaptation, Regression, The Ghoul Next Door, Basilisk, and Deluge. He also written books such as Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, Uncanny X-Men, X-Men Blue, Magneto, and Asgardians of the Galaxy for Marvel, Sinestro and Lobo for DC, and Shadowman and Punk Mambo for Valiant. A very all-encompassing writer, having explored the many avenues of comic book writing, but also recently having his debut in the world of novels with Bones of Our Stars, Blood of Our World, which is an incredible cosmic horror tale that I absolutely implore everybody to check out. But most importantly, and relevant to this podcast, he is also the writer for Monsters Unleashed, which is a comic book that centers around Marvel character Kid Kaiju. Please welcome Cullen to today's episode. All right, so first things first, what was your introduction to kaiju cinema, and how has that affected your trajectory as an artist?
I guess I discovered kaiju cinema. I mean, people of my age discovered it. Most of us discovered it the same way. And that is every Saturday and Sunday afternoon when I was growing up, some giant monster movie was airing on television in the afternoons. I remember it was after cartoons, on Saturday morning. Cartoons were over, time for monster movies, and we'd watch. I'd watch Godzilla movies and King Kong, and I'd watch all those. I vividly remember watching Godzilla versus Megalon when it aired in prime time, and it had these bumpers where Godzilla would come out and tell jokes. I had no idea that was John Belushi at the time in the Godzilla costume. But wow. I remember sitting on the floor of my living room in Newton Grove, North Carolina, watching a Godzilla movie on prime time. So and that would have been, kindergarten age is about the time that it all came about for me.
Yeah, and I love that tidbit about John Belushi, because you could put him up with the other names of suit actors, ones who have played Godzilla in the past. I guess technically, he's one of them in a sense. Probably not as intense, but
I have looked and hunted for any footage of that to see those bumpers, and I maybe someone else has found them. I've never seen them since, but I remember Godzilla telling a joke and a meteor would come in from off camera and hit him and knock him down. So it was it's a foundational memory for me.
That's awesome. I'm going to be on the hunt for that too.
If you find them, let me know.
I will.
I have looked and looked. I think they have been lost to time.
Yeah, but we'll keep looking. And then, since I've got more questions for you here than usual, I want to ask you something that I ask on my other podcast, my more film based. But what are your top 5 favorite movies?
And we're talking giant monster movies, right?
In general, actually, this one, it could be any, but if you want to throw in a giant monster movie, yeah.
Oh, I didn't anticipate having to name my favorite movies in general. So The Thing and Alien both rank pretty high. If they vie for the number 1 and 2 spots, and they probably switch back and forth. I really like Big Trouble in Little China. I think uh, it's just such a fun movie. I like Brotherhood of the Wolf a great deal, which was this French horror movie that came out. It's sort of a French horror movie / kung fu picture that came out a little while ago.
Is it this
That's
guy?
the one.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Got this just last year, actually, was the first time I ever saw this.
Yeah, so I'm a fan of that movie. I was sitting at a bar the other night and I went on a rant of how I think Transformers, the movie from 1986, is always going to be in my top 10 movies of all time. But I don't know if it cracks the top 5. And then, I mean, I might as well throw in a giant monster movie, right?
Yep.
And this one might surprise people, maybe. My favorite giant monster movie is Gamera 2, Advent of Legion.
Oh, that's a part of the middle of the 90s trilogy, right?
Yeah. I think it is a near perfect giant monster movie.
Yeah.
And you know, when I consider like if I were going to name off my giant, you know, my kaiju movies, right? I would immediately tell you, well, let's just discount. Let's not put 1933 King Kong. Let's not consider 54 Godzilla, and let's not consider Godzilla -1. Let's knock those out of the list. And then, you know, I think if I were to name my favorites of that, Gamera 2 would still. I mean, it's on my top 10 movie list of all time anyway. So it has to be It has to take the number 1 slot in my kaiju movies.
Yeah, and this is I picked this up at a resale shop. This is the Gamera trilogy. I think Arrow released this. Yeah, I was surprised because it was the first time I watched it, and I was like, these are like quality monster flicks. I love. Well, yeah,
people think of Gamera, they only think of those, you know, the 70s Gamera, and 60s Gamera, which I think there's a charm to those as well, but they're inarguably terrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, when those 90s movies came out, they took me by such surprise. And then the Gamera, the Legion movie. I think Legion, the monster, is one of the coolest looking of all like suit monsters, and it's looking back at it, I'm like, man, they animated that with people in suits. Mm-hmm. And yet that monster looks awesome.
Yeah. No, it was it was a real treat to be able to binge all 3 of those movies back to back.
Yeah, they're great, and then such a disappointment that we never got a 4th one.
Yeah, but you know what? I liked I obviously didn't like it that much. I forgot what the full name of it was in 2006. It was that Gamera
Gamera the Brave.
Yes, yep, that one. Yeah, I like that one. It was very charming.
I like it too, but I wanted to see what happened to that 90s run. They left it on such a big cliffhanger that we never got to see any more of it.
Yeah, and even Gamera in general, we just, you know, we had that Netflix show recently, but we're not getting like. It'd be cool if, even at this point, if America picked it up for like another MonsterVerse thing, just to see someone else doing it. I there's a lot there, and I think we're missing out not having it. Because I mean, you go to conventions too, and there's G-Fest out over here where I live. I'm in Illinois, and there's so much appreciation for Gamera. So you would think that there's like enough out there outside of just like a Netflix cartoon that, you know, we'll be getting more within that universe.
We can dream.
Yeah.
We can dream.
Of course. But to get into one of the main subjects of our conversation here, if actually, you know what, would you like to introduce Kid Kaiju and then your piece of that history and what you've done
Yeah.
with that character?
So Kid Kaiju is a Marvel character in the Marvel universe. I guess he appeared, I don't know how many years ago it was now. Uh,
2016.
15, 16, 16, 2016. He showed up in a book called Monsters Unleashed, which was a Marvel event limited series. Uh, and it was designed so that readers could get like an overview of the Marvel universe. So it featured everyone: X-Men, Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, Fantastic Four, all the main characters of the Marvel universe. And then it was kind of the storyline was about this giant monster invasion. And Kid Kaiju was this character who he was a boy who had the ability to summon monsters that he drew. So if he drew a monster, it would appear from wherever it was, and these monsters sort of became this last line of defense against these invading kaiju.
And what's Kid Kaiju's name in the comic? Is it Kai?
So there's debate on how it's pronounced, and probably even within Marvel, it's pronounced Kai.
Kai. Okay.
I don't care. I don't care what anyone at Marvel says. It's pronounced Kai. Kai Kawade was his name.
Yeah, and I think I had read somewhere that because you wrote Monsters Unleashed, right?
Yes.
And you modeled a lot of Kai after your own kid. That was at least the inspiration for some of it.
Yeah, I did. I feel like he looks like my kid. In the descriptions I gave the artist to draw him, he looks like my kid. My kid. So we adopted my son from China, and his name, his Chinese name was Kai, which means stone. So that's why his name in the book was Kai Kawade, which he's Japanese in the comic. And there was some debate. Some folks wanted to call him Key Key in the comments. Like, no, his name's Kai. Let's not get it twisted. But yeah, so he looks like my kid. I tried to give him Kai was a little older than my son was at the time, but I tried to give him some of my son's mannerisms, and I just tried to keep that in mind as I was writing. And yeah, I think. And Kai has this mane of hair, which my kid, has grown into his own mane of hair. So I feel like my kid may look more like Kai now than he did when he was, little.
Yeah, has he read Monsters Unleashed?
He's looked through them. He's not a comic. He's not a comic kid. He was never all that impressed with the idea of being a comic book character.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. How old is he now?
Almost 18.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's that's fair. But with the character of Kid Kaiju, I know that going into it, there's a little bit of an established I guess lore with the character after he showed up in Totally Awesome Hulk #3 or whatever. But how much, I guess, agency did you get to kind of explore what he can do? Really?
So it's interesting because so the character shows up briefly in that issue of Hulk, but if you look at that issue of Hulk, you'll notice the character looks completely different.
Oh, okay.
And there's a big reason for that. Monsters Unleashed was originally not going to be called Monsters Unleashed. I can't remember what it was going to be called. And the character, the kid, was originally going to be, and I kid you not, was going to be Jack Kirby, not an analog for Jack Kirby. They were going to introduce young Jack Kirby into the Marvel Universe. And that's why if you look at the Totally Awesome Hulk issue, That's Jack Kirby sitting there drawing a very young version of Jack Kirby drawing in his notebook. And that was the only thing that's the only time the character ever appeared before Monsters Unleashed. And that all fell apart for various reasons. It fell apart on the Marvel side of it. And so I had complete agency to do anything I wanted to the character. And it changed everything about the character. His, the name Kid Kaiju, he wasn't going to be called Kid Kaiju. He wasn't, he was going to, I can't remember what he was going to be called, but
I love the name though, Kid Kaiju. I think that
that name, I was very proud of that name. I was very proud of that one. But yeah, so, and the other thing was originally, when the original story, the monsters that were going to appear in the comic were all going to be Jack Kirby creations. So in the original version of the story, the only monsters you would see would have been monsters that Jack Kirby created, which that's great. But as soon as the Kirby of it all was gone, that opened it up for me to put a lot more monsters in it. And because Marvel had a long history of monsters, and a lot of them Kirby didn't create, but it put a lot more monsters in it. It allowed me to bring in these creatures from the stars, these kaiju from the stars that were going to try to destroy the Marvel universe, and it really allowed me to change the character. The Kid Kaiju's powers became something vastly different, because he could summon monsters. He could summon any monster he could, he knew of or could envision. But then as the series progressed, he ended up being able to create his own monsters. So he creates a team of very kaiju inspired monsters that had never appeared in Marvel before. He created this team of originally it was 6 monsters, and it got knocked down to 5, but the monsters could fuse together, sort of Voltron-like, into a even bigger monster that had all of their powers and everything.
Was that Smasher?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun to do that, because those 5 characters were fun to create. They each had their own personality. They, as the series continued, they became their own, sort of almost like a super team in the Marvel universe of their own. And that was all stuff that I put in there as soon as they said, okay, this isn't Jack Kirby. And then from there, as far as I'm concerned, it just that everything became brand new at that point. It was a completely new ball game.
Yeah, and I think especially from your perspective, I imagine that you love that you're like, okay, now this opens up where I could create some shit, right? I can, and I'm interested. So with those, 5 or 6 monsters, would you be able to just kind of run through like the kaiju inspiration for them, like some of the, big movie monsters that you were thinking about when putting this together?
Yeah, I mean, there's there's one called Aegis, who's this really strong, sort of armored looking guy, and he's I think he has more personality than most of the kaiju out there, because all of these monsters talk, right? So they all have their own personalities. But Aegis, to me, I think I sent the artists some images of like Mechanicon, because I like that bulky upper torso that Mechanicon had.
Yeah.
And I always wanted Mechanicon to get out there and really duke it out, and he never does. So yeah, I mean, visually he was more of a Mechanicon. There's one called Hivo, who's pretty much made of electricity, and I'm not sure who I would say he's inspired by. He's his own. He's probably more inspired by some of the old classic Marvel monsters, the smaller monsters, like creatures like Zax and things like that. But he was an interesting take on like an electricity monster. And there was Makara, she's she's definitely robotic. So she's obviously, Jet Jaguar and Ultraman and those kinds of characters. And there was Slizik, who is a big dragon, which probably picked up from like Ghidorah. He doesn't have three heads, but creatures like that. And then there was the mighty Scrag, who's this giant insect. So obviously has a little bit of, not appearance wise, but I can't help but think of Mothra and Batra in particular, and those great insect kaiju.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what about the design for Smasher? Was there
that one was more that one was more left with the artist, because we had the five creatures, and I'm pretty sure I just said, okay, now they're going to fuse together, make this look like a new thing.
Yeah,
something new, but also a fusion of these five critters. And then honestly, there's a lot of Voltron in it, with the five becoming one, or a lot of the Transformers, like the Constructicons and things like that. But yeah, the design of that was left mainly to the artists at that point.
Okay. And with Kid Kaiju, after your series with him, has he come back? Has anybody tapped into that again, or have they just kind of put him on ice or something? Because I picked up Monsters Unleashed, but yeah, I haven't really heard about or read much about anything after that.
So no, he had the only other time he appeared, not in Monsters Unleashed. Well, he appeared in. I did a book called. He appeared in books I wrote. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I did a book called. Was it Venomverse, or it was one of the Venomverse books, which was very focused on the character of Venom, and these aliens invaded, and the monsters from Monsters Unleashed played a role in that story. And then a few years later, Marvel did a one-shot that was really more of like a guide to a number of the monsters in the Marvel universe. Like, I don't know what those pieces of art are called. I see them all the time, but they're almost like anatomy charts of the monsters, where they did like a book of those for the Marvel monsters, and they framed it around. I framed it with a Kid Kaiju story, so he appeared in that. But as far as I know, he has not appeared in any other comic books since then. And who knows? Maybe they just don't know what to do with him. Maybe, I mean, he is genuinely an insanely powerful character. If you really think about it, he could very easily short circuit a lot of their stories. Because he's so powerful. So I think maybe they're a little nervous of how to use him.
Or they might have to, I guess, kind of restructure how the power works exactly to maybe power scale him a little bit. But
maybe. I mean, there were notes in my outlines and my plans that would have allowed people to use him pretty easily. But also at the same time, I kind of don't want people to. I mean, if it's not going to be me writing Kid Kaiju, I don't really want anybody to write him. But that's just me being selfish, and it's not realistic when writing for Marvel. But no, he has not shown up in comics since then.
Yeah, and I mean, this probably would be even more difficult, but like, what would you think of the prospect of Kid Kaiju getting on the screen to some capacity?
Oh, I mean, I think the Monsters Unleashed characters and the story could very easily make it very cool, even if it's not like centered around the Marvel universe. I think it'd be cool to see these characters in a movie. And what's weird about it is, so Kid Kaiju appeared in one of the Marvel video games. I can't remember the name of it. It's one of the not Rivals, but one of the more turn-based games had Kid Kaiju in it with his powers, and he could do things that you could draw. He could use his powers of drawing to create. create monsters. And then he also appeared in a cartoon out of Japan. They did that Japan had their own Avengers cartoon. And Kid Kaiju appears in one episode and all his monsters appear in one episode of this Avengers cartoon.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
I've only seen it on YouTube, and I've seen it's not translated, so I don't know what they're saying, but there's Kid Kaiju right on the screen. My kid not impressed with that either. I was like, look at this, here you are in a video game. Here's that's you right there on screen on this cartoon. No, he didn't.
He's just like, whatever. But I think that, that would be a really cool opportunity, especially because they've got this like Godzilla crossover, to just do like a Marvel kaiju movie, like really pay homage to monster flicks. I think that
they should have they should have given me a call to write a Kid Kaiju Godzilla crossover.
Because they just
it's not like I haven't written comics about both of those characters. It just seems to make sense.
But now, if you write another Kid Kaiju comic, he could summon Godzilla because Godzilla exists in the Marvel Universe now.
Godzilla exists in the Marvel Universe as long as the license is there.
Right? Yeah, that's true.
Because because Godzilla has existed in the Marvel Universe,
right?
Because in the 70s there was this great Godzilla series that ran in Marvel. It was awesome. They did they only had the rights to Godzilla, so they created all these crazy monsters for him to fight. And then the series ended, and Marvel no longer had the license. And then there was an issue of West Coast Avengers, where this mutant monster comes rising up out of the water. It looks a little bit like Godzilla. And like Hawkeye goes, oh, that's the same monster that attacked New York City a couple of years ago, but it looks like he's mutated more. And what was he called? I don't know. I can't remember. Right.
Yeah. And you definitely don't want to get into a legal battle with them if the license runs out. But
right.
Yeah, there's I don't know. I think that there's a lot of potential with that, and it's so fun. It's just like, you get a little ridiculous, but I think there's charm to that, and who doesn't like giant monsters, I think it's just a matter of maybe, I don't know, cost in live action, because you got to see
in a movie it'd be very expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an expensive. Even if they went classic, people in suits, that's still an extremely expensive story to tell.
They should do that, though. If this ever comes up, imagine that, doing them all in suits. That'd be amazing.
Oh, what would be they could do a movie and just have all the normal special effects for all the human-sized characters, just like it looks like a Marvel movie. But then when the giant monster appears, it's just some dude in a suit and on strings flying around. To me, that's the kind of dumb that I like.
Yeah, and I think that would be amazing. But in terms of cost, I mean, if they could always try to get Yamazaki, once he finishes up -0 and be like, hey man, do your magic on that small budget that you did for -1 and, give us something. But no, that's, I will always advocate to hopefully see Kid Kaiju in the future, because as a Kaiju fan, it would just be so cool to have more of a hero that's kind of like their persona. It's their name's literally Kid Kaiju.
Yeah, that last story I did for him in that monster book was really, it set up an entire, I mean, it kind of set things up where it could go somewhere. And because there's a descendant of Dr. Frankenstein in the Marvel Universe now, who's a kid. And I poised those two as like arch nemesis, Kid Kaiju and this Frankenstein.
Interesting. If you had the chance to like explore that again in another story, kind of what would that look like? What would that rivalry end up like?
Oh, who knows? I don't know, because it would. I would love to do it, but it needs more than an issue. It needs it needs another big It needs at least 5 to 12 issues.
Yeah, and since you said how like Monsters Unleashed was like this big Marvel event, so you had that sandbox with all these Marvel characters. Is that like the one thing where it's like if you make this story with them, like something at that time obscure like Kid Kaiju, is it they say you have to have all these characters in it, or they just kind of present like, okay, we're gonna do this and we're gonna have Kid Kaiju at the center of it, do it this way? I mean, how does that look?
No, for that one, it was really they said, they wanted a book about monsters, and as an event, it had to feature it had to feature as many Marvel characters as possible. So that's why there's literally all the heavy hitters of Marvel show up in that story,
Gotcha.
in the original 5 issues. But yeah, that was a requirement of the story. We have to throw all of the heroes into this story, and then Kid Kaiju appears in the midst of it all.
Oh, very cool though. I wish they would just let you get free reign and just, give us a Kid Kaiju series instead of having it with all these other Marvel guys. Just
Oh yeah, well, I mean, there was so after the limited series, we did do a Monsters Unleashed ongoing quote unquote series. I think it went to 12 issues, and there were fewer Marvel mainstays in it. But one of the things is they're very aware of, if they're going to have a successful book in the Marvel universe, you kind of have to feature some of the other Marvel characters.
yeah. Yeah, which I guess I don't blame them, because at the end of the day, there's like marketing and business involved with
Right.
it, and you need a pull for those who aren't familiar, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's more, readers of a Marvel book want to see characters they're familiar with, at least to some degree.
Yeah. I can agree with that. What do you think about Shin Godzilla? Because that's in my top three. And you mentioned -1 in 1954, which are also in my top three. But
Shin Godzilla's good. I like it. It's not it's nowhere near my top list of Godzilla movies. I enjoy it, but I enjoy almost all Godzilla movies.
yeah,
Uh, it's to me, it's probably it's middle, or it's like in the middle of my favorite. If I were to rank all the Godzilla movies, it's right there
right.
in the middle. I like that it did something different. I like that. I like the satirical nature of it. But I am a little set in my ways with what I like about Godzilla, probably. So that's why it doesn't crack the top of the list. Interestingly enough, I like Shin Ultraman, and I really love Shin Kamen Rider.
Yeah, that trilogy of movies. I mean, I loved all of them, but yeah, I just think it's funny that we got Shin Godzilla in 2016, which was like this, it was satirical, but Godzilla itself was much darker, almost cosmic horror. And then we
Right.
got -1, which was a lot more conventional, but it was very much I think, better all around movie and experience there.
Oh yeah. Right.
Um, and I think they were talking about bringing back Shin Godzilla, but
Oh.
nothing, I don't think has been greenlit actually, but if they do, if it doesn't have Hideaki Anno on it, then I don't think it should happen.
Right.
Um, but Shin Ultraman, yeah, when I watched that one, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like the Shin series in general, like those three movies, I came to those later too.
Right.
And I'm just like, why the hell aren't
Well,
more people talking about them?
they were weird movies if you think about because it wasn't what I expected. I really expected, after Shin Godzilla, when Shin Ultraman came out, I was like, oh, here's going to be the weirdest Ultraman I've ever seen. And instead, it was basically like 3 or 4 episodes of Ultraman,
Yeah.
of the TV series, just done more well done, fused together. which was kind of surprising. And then Shin Kamen Rider, I knew very little about Kamen Rider going into that movie. And I kind of loved that they just said, hey, this is a world and there are people in armor based on insects. Get with the program or, get lost. We don't care. You have to pick. And so I like that it just throws you in on that one. So it was interesting. They're all three very different kind of takes on just movies in general, but definitely on the Ultraman to me was the most sort of traditional of the three. I mean, it really did seem like they took 3 or 4 episodes of Ultraman and made a made a movie out of it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And, I think that it definitely it holds up. And I think that Ultraman is another property that, deserves more credit for what it is, because I think that in the kaiju space, I think that it provides a lot of really great things. And then just even like if you're talking superhero type stuff, I mean, I think it has like a really, really great world building element to it. But
oh yeah, for sure.
Kamen Rider, I've never heard of it before I watched the movie, and I was just like, what the fuck? But like in a good way,
Right.
Like just how over the top the action was, but how everybody was moving like it was a Power Rangers episode or whatever.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That absolute cinema. I like that's the kind of obscure that I like and I wish we got more of, but as you may have guessed, there's not as much of a crowd for that nowadays.
No.
Or I think at any point, honestly, not even nowadays. I feel like that's always been a little niche. But staying on comics, but switching gears a little bit. So I think it was around 2020 or whatever, The Empty Man came out, and it's kind of garnered a cult following since then. I like the movie a lot, but going to the comic, there's definitely a lot of differences in it. So first thing is, I would love to get your take on the movie and kind of your thoughts on that. And then outside of that, if anybody were to continue it, maybe in film or whatever, would you want them to stick closer to how you handled it in the comic? Or did you like what they did in the movie and you would kind of like that, or do you look at the movie as like a predecessor to what happens in your comic?
I know that on the film side, that was always what they were saying is let's think of this as a predecessor to the comic. And that's fine. I think the movie's a great movie. I don't think it's a great adaptation. It's its own. They're two very different properties,
Right.
And that's fine. I think the movie's great. I enjoy the movie. I'm proud of that movie. I'm proud that it was based on or inspired by the comic. And I wouldn't mind. I'd love to see a sequel to it. I'd also like to see a film or TV version of The Empty Man that's a little closer to the comic. And what's interesting is they're so different. You could easily do it. No one wouldn't be any the wiser. It would be fine.
Yeah, and at that point, I mean, is there a different title that you could think of, or would you just be like, "Hey, here's The Empty Man"? Just
who knows, man. These days, just here's another Empty Man. We'll call it just Empty Man, not The Empty Man.
Drop yeah.
Yeah, we scratch the, or like Ghostbusters, it'll be the original The Empty Man, and
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I like the movie just fine. I'd love to see him do more with that. But yeah, I would also love to see a version of The Empty Man that's a little closer to the weirdness of the comic too. I mean, and the movie has some of it, but the comic really went into some very, very different places.
Yeah, and I think I'm always an advocate for that, especially since I would say your comic is also very cosmic horror-esque with what is going on, right? And let someone else take a stab at it. But it wasn't like Stephen King in The Shining, right? It was a very amicable and very very friendly process of adaptation.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like I said, I think it's a cool movie, and I'm happy with that. I I saw so many versions of that movie, and I only, you know, in the making of it. My biggest regret with it is that it opened on the week of like lockdown, the first week of
Yeah.
lockdown. So the movie was destined to not do well in theaters. There was no way it was going to do well in theaters.
Yeah. And on top of that, it was pretty ambitious with being like over 2 hours.
Oh yeah, it was a long one for
The
sure.
opening sequence, you don't see title card until I think 20 minutes in.
Yes.
But yeah, lockdown, I yeah, absolutely crippled it before it could have any sort of
Yeah,
chance. But
it was a rough one. But I do like that it's gotten this sort of cult following since then.
yeah, yeah, I think, you know, I really appreciate seeing that, especially when they're like released at such a poor time period. Because
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened with The Thing, right? The Thing was,
Oh yeah.
critics did not like it at all when that came out, and you know, a couple decades later, and it's considered one of the best of all time. So
Right.
there's definitely that opportunity. Is there another graphic novel of yours that you would like to see? You might be a kind of guy who just does not like movies, and I'm here asking you like, hey, what if this or this became a
No,
movie?
I
But
like movies. I like movies a lot. And yeah, I mean,
yeah,
there's several of my creator-owned things that I'd love to see adapted. Uh there's about 8 of them that are in the works in various stages right now.
oh hell yeah.
So you know, hopefully something on that front trips and crosses the next stage into the next stage soon or sooner rather than later.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no, you know, I love movies, I love TV. uh I would love to see some more of these things get the adaptation treatment for sure.
Hell yeah. Um, I recently read Bones of Our Stars, Blood of Our World. It was fantastic. Cosmic
Thank you.
horror done extremely well. Um, I was just curious what your inspiration and the process was of creating the book, and how come, you know, someone who was doing comics up to this point, why were you suddenly like, you know what, let's give prose a try?
Well, you know, even though I've been doing comics now for 20 years, but I started out writing short stories and pitching novels. I always loved comics, so I was also pitching comics. But my earliest attempts to my earliest attempts to be published were almost all in prose anyway. And then I got into the comics of it all, and I enjoy writing comics. There's a sense of immediate gratification with comics that I really am enamored with, and that kind of and I've been very busy doing comics, so it just I didn't pursue the novel. In my mind, there was always a world where, okay, at some point I'm going to start writing, novels, and I was talking to my literary agent, and he said, you really at some point need to try your hand at a novel, and I threw a pitch together for the book that became Bones of Our Stars, Blood of Our World, and and he liked it, and we went to a publisher with it right away, and the publisher liked it straight away. So it just became it just happened more than anything. It was like maybe it was the right time to strike, whether I knew that or not. And then it just happened. So then I just dedicated some time to writing that novel, and yes, it's a shockingly different process. uh, and I loved it, but it was very stressful at times. I found myself getting lost in not corrections, but expansions. I would go back and read a chapter to see if I needed to rework anything, and I'd end up writing 6 more chapters because I thought, oh, I can expand on this, this thought. And I could see how easily it could be for a writer to get lost and never be able to reach that ending because they're going down myriad paths. And but it was super enjoyable. I love doing it. I'm working on a second novel now. It's, trying to figure out how to balance that with comics is because I don't want to turn my back on comics. So like I said, I enjoy comics too, but I like telling stories, and I don't care too much what medium I'm telling those stories in. In short stories, novels, screenplays, role playing games. I don't, as long as I'm telling a story, I'm having a good time.
Absolutely. With Bones of Our Stars, what inspired the setting for it? And I would love to know, like, I don't want to spoil too much, but horseshoe crabs, like the aesthetic of horseshoe crabs. Like, I just
Yeah,
would love to know where that all came from.
it all comes from the same place.
Mhm.
When I was a kid, we used to go. My dad loved to take us all fishing. He had a boat, so we'd drive a couple of hours down to the coast on Atlantic Beach, at the Outer Banks of North Carolina, or in the Outer Banks of North Carolina towards Atlantic Beach, that area. And we stayed on a little island called Harker's Island, which cemented itself in my brain because I spent so many weekends there over so many, so many years. And I have not visited again since I was probably 20 years old. And I thought about, when I was writing Bones of Our Stars, Blood of Our World, I thought about going back and using it as a research trip to visit Harker's Island. But then I was like, I don't want to, because I want to capture what I loved about it then. Although I did do some image searches and things like that, and it doesn't look like it's changed that much. But as far as horseshoe crabs, the same thing. We'd go out on that boat and we'd go fishing, and I remember we were always finding horseshoe crabs overturned. We were finding dozens and dozens of horseshoe crabs on sandbars and islands. We'd find them, and I've always liked the look of them. I always thought they were such strange looking, such prehistoric looking creatures.
Yeah.
And I remember, I don't know why they might have washed up this way. I remember we were on an island or on a beach, and there were just hundreds of them on the beach, and those kind of things just stuck with me. So yeah, it all came from those trips when I was a kid.
Yeah, and I love that because you really feel the setting. I think that's one of the biggest things, and one of the necessary things when telling a story is like that town feels like a secondary character in a sense, because you start to understand.
I wanted the town in the book. It's Wilson Island.
Yep.
I wanted it to live and breathe, and that's why I spend so much time, kind of describing different settings. And that's why there's some weird, quirky things that you're like, well, that's just an odd detail. But that's because those odd details make things seem a little more realistic. Because this is an odd place we all live in.
Right.
We just tend to forget that sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it just makes it feel a lot more authentic and lived in when you do capture those little subtle things. Otherwise, it's just like boring. It's like, okay, these characters could literally be anywhere, but when you explore the town they're in, you like I said, I mean, it makes it a part of the story, and that's one of the key things with constructing any story is capturing that,
Right.
because that's just another way to immerse you. Not only do you see these characters interacting, but you're sitting there with them in that town. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So I definitely I love that. And honestly, have you seen Midnight Mass on Netflix?
I have. Yeah.
That's another story that I like a lot. It's probably my favorite show, but that's another one where in a visual sense you've got that seaside town, and you feel that as like a part of the story too, like as a character.
Oh yeah, the town comes to life in that. The same with Stephen King's Salem's Lot, both the book and the original miniseries that came on. They spend so much time in detailing the town and the characters that live there.
Yeah, and the last example of that I could think of is Jaws.
Oh yeah,
Amity. Yeah, that's
believe me. There's a lot of Jaws in the DNA of Bones of Our Stars, Blood of Our World. It was.
Yeah, I could feel it.
Yeah, there's definitely Jaws in that, and there we go. You know what? I should have said that earlier when we were talking about favorite movies. Jaws is right there in the top. That's the first movie I saw in a theater, and it's still just as good now when I watch it as it was then.
I saw the recent re-release they did in theaters. I caught it on one of the IMAX screens, and how was it seeing it for the first time?
Oh, it was great. And I was little. I mean, I was very young, but I remember watching the movie. I remember the elements that scared me most. And the body coming out of the hull of the ship underwater, that freaked me out, and I remember that moment in the theater. But then maybe even more than that, those barrels, when they pop out of the water, they freaked me out so much that when those barrels would pop up, I remember my dad putting his arm around me and holding like because I was jumping every time those barrels would pop. And but yeah, the barrels freaked me out when I was a kid.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I'm sure you've heard the story about why the barrels became such a large proponent of the movie, right? That
oh yeah,
Jaws wasn't working, so they're like, all right, what else can we do?
But it was just a clever way of showing the motion of the shark without showing the shark, right? It was really neat. When I was a kid, that didn't dawn on me. It's just that's a scary barrel popping up.
And you knew that meant that Jaws was close by, right?
Here he comes. Here comes that shark.
Yeah, awesome.
And it was really interesting because, like I said, we spent so much time on the beach and on the ocean. It changes it definitely changed the way I looked at everything after that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think there was like a real large uptick of shark kills and everything. Like people were out there killing sharks, and it really but yeah, that movie is I feel like no matter what, like if you're into sci-fi, there's an element of Jaws that you probably love. If you like thrillers, horror, all that shit, except maybe drama and comedy, you don't get comedy. Yeah, you get comedy in that a little bit,
there's plenty of comedy. Yeah, I mean,
and you do get drama too.
There's drama. There was more drama in the novel of Jaws because there were affairs going on between some of the characters.
I didn't like any of that. I tried.
Yeah, they rightfully it may be a situation where, and I don't say this often, I think the movie is definitely better than the book.
Absolutely.
There were some interesting choices in the book.
Yeah, 100%. But at the end of the day, we still got one of the greatest movies of all time.
That's right.
And really a great example of the innovation of filmmaking and how it can make your project even better. Oh, what's the cat's name?
Oh, this is Betty, who has no sense of personal space. And she is a pure alley cat. And she loves to get right up on the desk whenever I'm doing these interviews.
Yeah, that sounds like a cat. That, wouldn't be a cat otherwise. So here at the end, I like to ask everybody the same question that I talk to, but where do you see yourself in 5 years?
It's interesting that you would ask that right now, because I've spent probably the last 2 or 3 weeks really assessing where I am now and where I'm going to be. Like when I should be writing a script or working on something like that, I've been sitting down doing mind maps and trying to figure things out. And I go through this every so often, but I have been thinking about, a 5 to 10 year plan. Where am I going to be? I've given up on the dream of ever retiring. That's not ever happening for me as a writer. Uh, so where I would like to be is I'm hoping I can still be in a situation where I'm able to tell as many stories as I want to, and have publishers who are going to support that and follow me. But even if not, if the publishers aren't there, I'll find a way. Uh, Even if I have to do it myself, if I have to Thanos it, I'll, fine, I'll do it myself. At the end of the day, I want to be able to. I'm hoping in 5 years I'm doing just as many different stories and different comics and different books and different mediums uh, as I am right now.
Yeah, and I think that we're in such a climate now that, if you did something independently, I think that there would definitely be a market for that. And I think I would like to think you've established yourself where you could probably, release something independently and see some success with that.
I'm sure, yeah, I could. I mean, there's a lot of work. I love working uh, with the publishers who are working with. I do a lot with Ignition Press right now on the comic front, and I love working with them because there's a support system there that
Yeah.
that I really like having. And I'm hoping, look, as long as they like working with me, and I'm doing what they, doing books that uh, they find value in, and that they're that they think they can sell, and their readers are digging them. I'll keep working with them as long as they'll let me.
Awesome. Yeah. I think that I think you'll be all right.